evening, my name is Erica Bordeaux and I'm currently enrolled in Business and Marketing Administrations. To me, ethics is the moral principles that help people choose between right or wrong. Ethical decision making helps people to make the right choices. Susan was a brand new student at RCC. She had just graduated high school and she thought that college would be a breeze considering that she made all A's and B's without even studying. However, whenever she first got to college, she was very mistaken. Her very first semester, she ended up failing all of her classes except for one. In the one class she did pass, she ended up passing with a C, a very low grade. Her GPA had dropped to an astonishing 1.0. She needed a 2.0 in order to continue to the next semester. So she decided to take on 6 new classes in order to bring back her GPA. She also decided to go to time management classes to help her with her time management and studying skills to be able to evenly distribute the work throughout each class. Susan also managed to pick up a side job in order to help pay for the classes that she failed. Unfortunately, even though if you have a class and you've taken the class fully, if you fail it, you still have to pay for the entirety of the course. She ended up doing so much better in this next set of classes. She was able to use the time management she has learned, and she divided all of her work throughout a planner so she knew when each work needed to be completed. She decided to put assignments for all of her classes that were due sooner first, and to leave classes that were due a little bit later a little further behind, so that she was able to complete them closer to the due date and be able to manage all of her time properly. However, she always put history last. Her history class was not her favorite. She just didn't like the writing. There was so much writing that had to be done in the class, and she was never good at writing skills. Since Susan was not very good at her writing skills, and that was the majority of this history class, she decided that she needed to set up a meeting with her professor. She knows that this professor does not like handing out extra credit assignments, so she didn't even bother to ask. But he did tell her that there is still a final essay that is due, and that if she does wonderfully on that, it will bring her grade up. Susan's college went on an annual break. She only had 1 or 2 assignments left for each class and to study for her final exams, so she wasn't worried at all on falling behind on work, because she had been doing so well on her time management. Or so she thought. She had so much fun with her friend at the beach that they decided to stay a few extra days. And whenever she got back and looked at her essay assignment for history, she was shocked. It was not an essay that would take her a few hours. It was going to take her days to complete. Whenever Susan got back home from the beach, she realized that she has had this assignment all semester long. It was handed out to her in the syllabus on the first week of school. Realizing this, she realizes her poor mistake, but knows that it's too late to turn back time and redo it. So she decides to start working insanely hard to get this essay turned in on time. She's in the library every day working on this essay. Her essay starts off wonderfully. She's citing all of her work, she's using her own words, and she is working so hard to make sure that this essay is perfect. But then she had a thought. Well, my professor has to grade so many students' essays. Maybe he's not going to fully read mine. He won't notice if I plagiarize. She was poorly mistaken. She started plagiarizing, started with paraphrasing and adding in a few of her own words, changing a few sentences, but then she started just plagiarizing, copying and pasting from articles without proper citations. Susan didn't think anything of this and turned in her assignment. She had high hopes that she was going to get a wonderful grade and that she still had plenty of time to study for her finals in her other classes. Unlike she originally predicted, her professor did notice. He ended up sending out an email calling her into his room. She didn't think twice of it because it was the normal date and time that they meet up in the room. She thought it was just him reminding everyone that class is still in session even if it is close to the end of the semester. Susan walked into the classroom and realized that there were no other students there. Once Susan sat down, her professor walked out into the hall and grabbed another teacher as a witness for the conversation. Once she saw this, she realized that this conversation would not be going well. Her professor sat down with her and the witness they pulled from the hall and started asking a few questions. The professor started off by asking if she copied anyone's work or if she had a classmate help her on the assignment. Susan answered no. The professor then asked her if she had went to the college's writing center to help her with this huge assignment. She again replied no. Now I will be taking on the role as Susan's professor. Good evening, Susan. Thank you very much for coming in to speak with me today. So, as I'm sure you've noticed, you are the only one in class here today, and I need to discuss with you some issues that I've noticed. After our last meeting, I expected so much better from you. You told me that you would do better and that you would take everything I told you into account. And at the beginning of the essay that you turned in, you did do that. You did so well, writing in your own words, citing your sources, and I'm so proud of you for that. However, once I got further into reading your essay, I noticed that you started paraphrasing without citations. And the further I got, the more that you paraphrased and then started just plagiarizing. Now, as I'm sure that you know, plagiarism in my handbook, in my syllabus that I handed out to you, is not accepted. Since this is your first offense, I will be giving you a 0 on the assignment. And deliberate plagiarism in my classroom results in failing the course. So please, Susan, tell me that you did not deliberately plagiarize and cheat yourself out of this grade that you've worked hard for. Now, just in case you're unaware of what plagiarism means, plagiarism is copying someone's work intentionally or unintentionally, as I'm assuming you did, without citing their evidence and giving them credit. With the academic integrity policy through our school's student handbook, it states that you are held to such a high standard, and I really do believe that you can do better. Now, I do need to take steps towards this, okay? This is all a part in the handbook. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest that you go back to your dorm and do. I need to discuss this violation with you and determine the fault. Please tell me that you did not intentionally deceive me and that you did not intentionally plagiarize most of this essay. Now, I don't want you to sit here and tell me that you did not plagiarize, because I have something, an app, that will check every essay that is turned into me and tell me if there's plagiarism, and then highlight it. Highlight it, Susan. You had 5 sentences, back to back to back, copying directly off of the website, and you did not give them citations. You didn't credit them, and that is where our ethical issue stands right now. Now, since you have just told me that you did not intentionally plagiarize and try to deceive me, you did just mention that you were getting lazy and that you wanted it turned in, which I can understand. I was a college student at one point too. However, I do need to ask if you want the head of the curriculum to come and speak to us about this. They would sit here and they would take both of us, hear both of our sides, and they would come to a decision. And if you don't agree with the head of the curriculum's decision, you can take it to the dean. I'm letting you know this because you do have options. Now, Susan, I'm not going to fail you in the class for this. I do think that you have been very stressed with having a job that you've been working. You've been held to the high expectations of your family, being the first student to go to college, and you have just bounced back from a horrible first semester. So I will not make you fail the course. However, I will have to give you a 0 for this grade. And I know that my policy strictly states that I really do not give out extra credit assignments. But just this once, because I was there at one point too, I will allow for you to have an extra credit assignment. Now, this assignment is basically going to be a copycat of the essay. I do want you to redo it, and I want you to do it completely in your own words. Do not paraphrase, do not copycat, and do not leave out citations for the sources that you are using. Make sure that it is completely your own work, your own words, and go through the school's writing center in order for them to help you. This is the only time I'm going to do this, Susan, and I hope that you know not many other professors will be this lenient. So please do not disappoint me. Thank you for coming in and speaking with me today. Now, when it comes to the ethical tests that are used to determine Susan's ethical ability in this case, the first step is the honesty test. Now, personally, I do believe that Susan showed a majority of honesty when she was talking to her professor from what we saw in the case. Susan mentioned that she did not use other classmates in order to complete this essay, and Susan was completely true on that. She did not use other classmates' help. Susan also mentioned that she did not use the writing center, which she also did not do. She did show pure honesty in what she did tell the professor. However, it did not show in the case file that I read if Susan told him that the work was entirely hers. So I'm unable to make a final decision based on the evidence that I have at hand. However, I'm going to believe that Susan went ahead and lied to her professor and told her professor that she did the work completely on her own, and that is a lie, which would make her fail the honesty test. Now, in terms of the legal test, Susan did not commit anything legally wrong through the government. However, she did commit something wrong through the student handbook and her teacher's syllabus. Both state that plagiarism is not accepted. In her teacher's syllabus, it states that the first offense will receive an automatic 0, and multiple offenses will result in a failing of the course entirely. However, in the student handbook, it also mentions that plagiarism is not at all accepted. So Susan did commit plagiarism, which means that she was legally wrong in terms of the student handbook and her professor's syllabus. The third test is the conscience test. Susan, in my opinion, did this in well conscience. She didn't think anything of it. She thought that if her professor had so many people to grade, that her one project, her one essay, it wouldn't mean anything, that he wouldn't actually read through it and look through it. However, her professor did, and she only realized that she was in trouble for it whenever he called her into his room. And Susan was not in bad conscience whenever she committed this, unfortunately. I wish that I could sit here and say that she did this in bad conscience and that she knew what she was doing wrong, but I genuinely don't think she did. She had a very hard time in her last semester, and she just wanted to make sure that she finished the course without getting a failing grade. So, in my opinion, she did this in full conscience. Now for the consequences test. I do think that Susan knew the consequences for her ethically wrong actions. However, I don't think that she knew that these consequences would end up being applied to her, since this was her first offense of it. In her other assignments, she easily could have plagiarized it and just gotten away with getting a low score. However, she just decided to miss the assignment entirely. So since this is her first offense and she's never done anything like this before, in my opinion, I feel like she thought that she would not have any consequences since she wasn't known to do this. Now, in the publicity test, I think that if Susan's professor was watching her do this, she would not have committed this. If Susan's dean was there watching, she would not have committed this. Because I'm sure every college student is well aware that plagiarism is wrong. Colleges and professors in their syllabus and student handbooks make it very, very clear that plagiarism is huge and completely against their principles. So I do not think that Susan would have done this in front of any of her other teachers or administrators. So I do believe that my decisions on this case are going to be very different from a lot of the other students that you hear this oral presentation from. I am a high school girl that is also taking college classes, and I understand the feeling of it being a huge difference. You don't have someone walking with you side by side, telling you when to complete assignments, how to manage your time, and it is a struggle at times. However, once you get the hang of it, it gets so much easier. And I feel like Susan just didn't have support of her family to help her through this, considering that she was the very first person to go to college, and her family didn't know what type of advice to give her. Thank you so much for listening to my oral presentation number 2. Once again, my name is Erica Bordeaux, and I am currently enrolled in Business and Marketing Administrations. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation.